This is like the third panel. People are like, she needs no introduction, which I'm not taking as a compliment anymore. I'm like, there's a certain level of infamy that you could also get into, start getting a little bit worried about. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And I was sort of tasked with this concept of recognizing unconscious bias. And Ellen gave a little bit of the history here. But SAGE is, I think, really under the leadership of Dan Jones with his initial presidency, made this a priority for this essentially society, even before I think a lot of other places recognize. And I just want to say this is a space that we've been in for a long time, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes us better as an organization as well. And this will be kind of as a little bit of a throwback to where we started, but more importantly, I think anybody who's sitting in this room probably recognizes this is a problem. We were talking about this yesterday, right? We're like, if we're all sitting in this room, we probably know it is, but more importantly, going to give some strategies and solutions. I lean heavily on our institutional experience at Michigan, probably because I'm biased, just 100% out there. But it's not meant for people to walk away and say, oh, Michigan knows everything. What it's meant to do is show you how we've interrogated and looked at our environment and thought about strategies about how to move our environment forward. Some of it may make sense in your current role, in your current position, some of it may not. But if the goal today is that everybody can walk away with one thing or one feeling that they get from this, and they think, what could I do in my institution different? How can I leverage my environment, to do something to make it better for others? I think that that's a success, not necessarily to look at the portfolio of things that we're gonna show you and think all these things need to fit. So in that, these are my disclosures, none of them are super relevant. But I will start with this, in that we are all unconscious and that we are all biased. I am biased, all of us are biased. And the reason for that is because that's how we were all designed. We weren't designed to think thoughtfully and thoroughly about every single interaction we have. We all at baseline make snap judgments and snap instinctual things based on our personal experiences, because in a primitive way, we like to think of our things as safe or unsafe. And when things are safe, we tend to judge them as things that we want around. And when things aren't like us, then we tend to look at those as unsafe. And once we think of things as unsafe, then automatically, even without us recognizing it, we get into this space where we may start treating something differently or not acting in our normal self. And the reason we do this is because we all are wired to see patterns, and these patterns are associated with our past experiences. And when we take our shortcuts, which we are all wired to do, this is where we get to misinterpretation. I'm gonna show you an image right now, and I don't want anybody to raise your hand, but gut check yourself. What's your first reaction to this image? You don't have to raise your hand. What do you think this person does? Like, how do you feel? How about now? How about if I told you that that's the same person? How do you feel? Different clothing, different things associated. How about now? What if I showed you this picture? What's the first thing that came to mind? Did you think she was a neurosurgeon or something of that nature? Probably not, because unfortunately, this is what we've been wired to think over time in our healthcare system, that certain races or certain genders or certain persons are more associated or more likely to have leadership positions, whereas others are more associated with other things. And we have to be conscious of this, which is why I put this up there, because we all need to check our biases every single day in every single interaction we have. Specifically, if we meet somebody, we can't make assumptions. We can't assume their role based on how they look. When we meet somebody and we get that gut feeling that says, I don't really like this person. Maybe that doesn't happen to any of you. Sometimes that happens to me. You have to stop and you have to ask yourself why. What's driving that? Is there any empiric data to suggest that? Or am I reacting to something sort of in my primitive brain that's making me think a certain way that I don't want to think? And so the problem with this isn't so much that we just check our assumptions and life's going on, but this really has a tremendous cumulative impact over time, because even the smallest amount of bias has really big consequences. And I like to show this simulation because it's pretty agnostic, it's data-oriented, it's algorithm-driven. And essentially what they did in this study is they did a computer simulation for a hierarchy of promotion. And what they did was they evenly split both groups, females and males, and they assigned men a 1-point advantage. So women could be ranked on a scale of 1 to 100, and men could be on a 1 to 101. What happened? After 20 simulations with that 1% edge, only 8 employees would be blue. You see that differential, and that was based on a 1% edge. And I'll ask you, does that look familiar? These are our data, recent data. I have the 2018 that I have to update with. It doesn't look that much different. And if you look at how we are progressing just as females through the ranks, whether it's associate professor, professor, division head, chair, dean, you see how that 1% difference slowly over time and accumulatively creates tremendous impacts in surgery. And then sometimes people will say, well, you know what, Dana, just be patient. It's just time. Wait your turn. Soon there'll be enough females in the workforce, and if you just wait long enough, at some point you're going to reach parity and everything is going to really be great. The problem is that's not true, because when we've modeled things out, when you look at trends in women progressing from medical school to surgical training and leadership, it'll take 100 years to get to parity at the current rate we're going, even with all of the attention that we're giving to this subject. And that's a problem, because that's not my daughter's lifetime. That's her daughter and my great-great-grandkids' lifetime. And that's just too slow. We can't do that. And then we haven't even considered the notion of intersectionality. A lot of times when we do this work, we get split up into these homogeneous groups, women and men, right? Or females and males, depending on whether you're using sex or gender. But we don't pay attention to the unique experiences and the unique attributes that make things different and further disenfranchise persons in already disenfranchised groups. And here you can see that. If you look at this, and if you look at, Dr. Butler published this in 2008, this isn't like a new issue. When you look at the deficit in number of underrepresented minority academic, you see further disenfranchisement down along the lines. And this has been published in Annals of Surgery, which is our premier journal. And it's not much better, because if we look at this going forward, and we look at this specifically in the context of Black and African-American females, this issue just gets so further perpetuated. We heard a really powerful, did everybody hear Kay Marie speak this morning? I mean, if you haven't, it's all recorded because we have the app and we're live streaming. Go watch that talk. That talk was hands down one of the most moving singular case studies in what this data looks like. And I would really implore everybody to go and to take the time and to listen to that and to really understand, at this time, no department chairs, what it is to be the sole first Black department female chair in a country, if not the world. And I think we really have to look at this, not just for the data they are, but for the people that it impacts also. And so what can we do? So as Ellen said, I'm a health services researcher. This is what we do in many places, and at Michigan particularly. And if you believe in sort of quality improvement and health services research, you get to this notion where every system is perfectly designed to get the outcomes it gets. So it's not a mystery that we have these outcomes and that people are faring poorly even when we give attention, because our system is not set up to do so. So what do? So you have to think of this in the big picture. So this is sort of my body of research and the way that I think about all projects and things that I do. I think there's a problem that we've identified and a certain action that we want to do, and there's a certain practice that we're actually doing, and the gap between is something called implementation science. And essentially what I do and what I study in my broader goal is understanding who needs to do what differently and how do you create sustainable change. And sometimes that's at the individual level, sometimes that's at the organizational level, and sometimes it's at the system level. And what I would implore everybody in this room to think about is why we can't use that same methodology that we use to study things like hernia repair, which if you go to other sessions, you'll see our residents presenting on. Quentin is in the audience right now. But why can't we apply that same rigorous lens of health services research to these other issues, these cultural issues, these problems that we're having? It's the same thing. There is an issue, there's an outcome that we want. There are sort of best practices around how to get there, and there's a chasm in between. And so I would implore all of you, while this is in the lens of social justice, to also put this in the lens of research and to really think critically every time something comes up, what can I do differently? How can I study this differently? How can I get the outcome I want to see? And so we actually did this at Michigan. I'll give you a little bit of a case study, what we did with females. What we did, and sorry to share all this dirty laundry with my chair, that's sitting right here in the audience, but that's okay, they let us publish all this. What we saw was when we went and looked at our data, guess what? 8-10 years ago, we had the same issue. We saw a survival curve analysis where women were not faring as well as some of the men in our department. We weren't getting promoted as frequently. And so we did something about it. We went and we actually interviewed all of the females currently at Michigan, those who had left Michigan, to really understand what were the systems and what were the organizational department level barriers to promotion, or why didn't they fare well, or if they left, why did they exit? And believe it or not, our chair at the time, Mike Mahone, let us publish this in JAMA Open, all of our dirty laundry and kind of all the different things that contributed from this. And what you saw on the slide before was something called the Michigan Women's Surgical Collaborative. Because when I came to Michigan, in the midst of us trying to assess all of this, we had an efflux of more senior female faculty for phenomenal positions that they got elsewhere. And there were 4 or 5 of us that got battlefield promotions, I would say, kind of a little bit earlier on in our career. And we banded together and we thought, and we sat together and we said, you know what? There's so many resources for residents and assistant professors, but what happens when you hit associate? And that became our practice gap. How do we get women to that first transition point from assistant to associate, or or having them thrive in associate? And that's also where I came upon this notion of the importance of peer mentorship. And so we created this network and this collaborative where we not only strengthened each other through it, but we disseminated that and strengthened our network and brought people to our meeting and brought people to our home, and we learned from one another. And those relationships to this day are some of the strongest that we all have. And we have this beautiful network, I think, across the country of persons who've not just spoken in our meetings, but who've attended and who've developed these relationships, through those meetings for empowerment. We do this with rigorous study. This is an R1. We keep trying to get to the goal line. It does well, then it doesn't. It does well, then it doesn't. But we're getting there. Slow incremental improvement, shots on goal, and we'll get that. But you can make a career out of this. But what's most important, and this is kind of where I want to end my talk, is on this notion of how do you create an environment that equitably recruits and retains, in an environment where we can all be successful. And this is where I'm going to go into Michigan a little bit. And this is where something called the Michigan Promise came with. And this is our promise to anybody who comes into the department, that we will develop you in your phenotype, not the phenotype of what we think a Michigan surgeon should be, but the phenotype of what you should be. And some of it starts with recruitment. Who do you bring through the doors? How do you normally hire? I mean, most of us got hired because somebody called somebody on our behalf. That's how I got hired most of my jobs, and I guess as many of you do. But if you don't have a candidate pool, how can you diversify your candidates? If you're not going out and looking for the best and the brightest and turning every corner to find people to come to your place, how can you do that? So we changed the way we recruit. All recruitments are open. All recruitments go through this panel. Now it's a Zoom panel, so sorry, that picture's a little bit outdated. But everybody hears the same set of questions and are evaluated by a diverse group that looks at them from the same lens, so there can be some parity or equipoise across comparisons of candidates. We have paid a ton of attention to our environment with something called the Culture Crew. You can see this is populated by faculty across the department and some residents. And what this is meant to do is a couple things. One, it's meant to serve as support for persons who may not feel comfortable going to ombudsman or going to their chair or division chief, but you always have somebody who you can trust at a different level if you need to talk to somebody. But it also comes up with these really cool initiatives that we've been doing across the university, which is really thinking about how do we present ourselves. Some of the cool things is this Walls Do Talk, where we honor our past with many of the portraits of the chairs that we've had, but we celebrate our future. And we put up these really amazing pictures with quotes that is very representative of our department. So if you walk around Michigan in our halls, walking from Justin's office all the way around the department, this is what you see. You see our present, and it's really exciting. We talk about cultural complications. Has anybody adapted this at your institutions? Couple people, I see like 1 or 2. This is great. If you take this away to bring back with you, this would be amazing. And what this does is it treats things that happen, those uncomfortable conversations, like any regular morbidity and mortality, where you sit and you debrief and you talk about things that may not be comfortable. It's a whole structured curriculum that was come up by Leslie Dossett, who's one of our faculty at Michigan, and Chelsea Harris, who's now a plastic surgery resident at the University of Maryland. And I would suggest that everybody go and kind of log on. They have a whole website. They have ideas. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a whole curriculum that you can do. We believe in achievement. A lot of times people are disenfranchised because your success is predicated on who your mentor is and sponsor, and I say that singularly. Mentorship and sponsorship should never be a singular thing. It should always be a group of people who are looking out for you, because you're not, a monolithic person. You have many needs and many goals and many desires, and you need somebody to do that. So we empower people when they come in to have a team around them to make sure they're on track, that they're achieving their goals, and those are called launch teams. And then we have boost teams for mid-career, right? We just identified mid-career as a gap. Some people are trying to figure out how to excel. Some people need a reboot. I think all of us at 5 to 10 years in get a little angsty. We don't quite know what we want to do. And having a team at that critical or pivotal point can be really instrumental to helping somebody find a new path or to augment or exponentially improve their current path. We have leadership development programs. This is something that Dr. Dimmick, I think, had created, what is it, like 8 or 9 years ago now. We do this in cycles, and then we also have breakthroughs every year where we empower people with the knowledge. There's no such, I mean, perhaps it's not, that's hyperbolic, but I don't think there's such a thing as a natural born leader. I think leadership are a set of skills which you can learn and frameworks which you can employ. And I think the more that you train people to do that, the more that you empower them. And then finally, different programs like early career faculty exchange so that you can expose our young faculty to other places and we can meet people from other institutions, give them a leg up, help people CVs and boosting. So I'm a little over time, so I just want to give you a couple takeaways from today. One, don't walk out of this room thinking you're not biased, because you are, and that's okay, because that's how we're wired. You have to own it, but you have to be intentional and conscientious about it. Two is intentionality. We all have to be intentional. If we are very intentional with our actions and our emotions and our words and what we do, and that also means saying you're sorry. If somebody corrects you and you did something and not being defensive, like if somebody gives you feedback and said, hey, you know, I don't like that you said that, thank you, should be your response, and learn from it. Don't get defensive from it. There's really no one-size-fits-all model. I just gave you some 30,000-foot views, a personal narrative, some things we're doing at Michigan. Take what fits, but do something, you know, where you're at. And really assess and maintain. It's not enough just to create this and let it go on, but really rigorously keep reevaluating, is what you're doing having impact? And I'll say thank you and turn it over.